My brother got a fully paid trip to Italy for his birthday. Mom hugged him and said, "You've always made us proud." I opened my gift, a $30 gift card and a talk about appreciating the little things. I just smiled, packed my laptop and stuff, and left that night. 3 weeks later, they called in panic when they realized I'd taken the income that had been keeping their whole house. I, 27M, have been the invisible backbone of my family for the last 6 years. And last month, on the night of my birthday, I finally stopped. Let me give you some context so this makes sense. I'm the younger of 2 sons. My brother is 30, golden child, former college athlete, the kind of guy who walks into a room and my parents light up like someone flipped a switch. I'm not saying he's a bad person. He's not. But the difference in how we've been treated our entire lives isn't subtle. It's a canyon. And I've been standing at the bottom of it since I was old enough to notice. Growing up, my brother was the one on the fridge. His report cards, his team photos, his trophies. The living room had a whole shelf dedicated to his football achievements. When he got a scholarship, my parents threw a backyard party with 30 people. When I got a merit-based academic award the same year, my mom mentioned it once at dinner and then moved on to asking my brother about his upcoming game. I was the quiet kid. Good grades, no trouble, stayed in my room building websites when I was 14, while my brother was getting standing ovations at football games. Teachers liked me. I never caused problems. But in my family, not causing problems meant not being noticed. My brother was loud, charismatic, always the center of attention. I was the background noise. By the time I was 21, I taught myself enough about software development and digital marketing to start freelancing. I was good at it. Really good. By 23, I was pulling in more than both my parents combined, working from my apartment, building client websites, and running ad campaigns for small businesses. No one in my family really understood what I did. They just knew I was always on the computer. My dad once asked me at Thanksgiving if I was planning to get a real job soon. I was making 6 figures at the time. I just nodded and passed the potatoes. Here's where the money part comes in, because that's what this story is really about. When I was 23, my dad had a health scare. Bad one. He was out of work for almost 5 months, and the medical bills nearly buried them. My mom worked part-time at a school, barely making enough to cover groceries. My brother had just started a new sales job and told them he was getting on his feet and couldn't help much. He sent them maybe $200 total during that entire period. I stepped in. I paid the hospital bills. I covered 3 months of their mortgage so they wouldn't lose the house. I set up automatic transfers to cover their car insurance and utilities. When Dad recovered and went back to work, things got better, but not by much. His pay had been cut because he shifted to a lighter role. So the transfers I'd set up, they just quietly kept going, month after month. I never stopped them. Over time, I became the financial floor under that household. I was paying around $2,800 a month toward their expenses. Mortgage supplement, insurance, my dad's medication costs, the internet bill, even my mom's car payment after her old one broke down and she financed a new one, assuming the help would continue. Nobody ever sat me down and thanked me properly. It just became expected. Like gravity. You don't thank gravity. Meanwhile, contributed nothing. He got promoted a couple of times, bought himself a new car, moved into a nice apartment downtown, and visited my parents on holidays, where he was treated like a returning king. Every visit was a production. My mom cooked his favorite meals, my dad clapped him on the back, and told him how proud he was. I usually sat at the end of the table and answered the occasional question about whether I was still doing computer stuff. My brother and I have birthdays 2 weeks apart. His is first. This year my parents announced they were throwing a combined celebration at their house, which already told me everything I needed to know, because it meant my birthday was going to be an afterthought, stapled onto his. But fine. I drove 3 hours to be there. The party was on a Saturday. My parents had decorated the living room, mostly with stuff themed around my brother's interests. His college jersey was framed and sitting on the mantel like a shrine. There was a banner that read "Happy Birthday," but it only had his zodiac sign on it, not mine. There were about 20 people there, mostly his friends and a few family members. I recognized maybe 5 of them. My parents greeted me at the door like I was a neighbor who'd wandered in. My mom gave me a side hug and immediately told me to help set up the extra chairs in the backyard. Not a "how was the drive" or "glad you made it," just a task. My dad shook my hand and then turned to greet someone behind me. I carried chairs for 20 minutes while my brother held court in the kitchen, telling some story that had everyone laughing. I made small talk with an aunt who asked me if I was still single and a cousin who wanted to know if I could fix his laptop. Nobody asked me about my work, my life, or what I'd been up to. At one point, I overheard my mom telling one of her friends about my brother's promotion, and how they always knew he'd do well. I was standing 6 feet away. She didn't mention me once. When it came time for gifts, my brother went first. My parents sat him down in the middle of the room like it was a coronation and handed him an envelope. He opened it and pulled out a printed itinerary. 2 weeks in Italy. Fully paid. Flights, hotels, tours, everything. Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. The room erupted. People were cheering, clapping, pulling out their phones to take pictures of him holding up the itinerary. My mom stood up and hugged him with tears in her eyes and said something about how he'd always made them proud, and this was their way of showing how much he meant to them. My dad was beaming behind her, his hand on my brother's shoulder, the whole picture-perfect family moment. I sat on the arm of the couch and clapped with everyone else. My face was neutral. My chest was concrete. Then it was my turn. My mom handed me a small bag with tissue paper in it. Inside was a $30 gift card to a coffee chain and a greeting card. The card had a handwritten note about appreciating the little things in life and being grateful for what you have. That was it. No trip, no framed jersey, no tears, no speech about pride, a gift card and a lecture disguised as a birthday wish. Someone in the room, one of my brother's friends, actually looked uncomfortable. I caught his eye, and he looked away fast. My brother didn't say anything. My dad was already in the kitchen, getting more ice. I thanked my mom. I smiled. I told her the gift card was thoughtful. And I meant it, in the most hollow way a person can mean something. She patted my arm and moved on to cutting the cake, which was my brother's favorite flavor. Chocolate raspberry. Mine is carrot cake. Has been since I was 12. Nobody remembered, nobody asked. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter and conversations that didn't include me. I helped clean up after. I washed dishes, while my parents sat with my brother in the living room, still buzzing about the Italy trip, looking up restaurants in Rome on my mom's phone. Nobody came to check on me. Nobody said happy birthday to me again after the initial awkward 30-second acknowledgement during the gift opening. That night everyone left by around 10. My brother headed to a friend's place. My parents went to bed. I sat in the guest room for about an hour, in the dark, doing the math. Not the emotional math, the literal math. Over 6 years, I had put roughly $200,000 into keeping that household running. $200,000. I had never been late. I had never complained. I had never held it over anyone's head. I never forwarded them a receipt or asked for acknowledgement. And in return, I got a $30 gift card and a reminder to be humble about what I have. I sat there and thought about what would happen if I'd never stepped in when Dad got sick. They would have lost the house. They would have drowned in medical debt. My mom's car would have been repossessed. My brother wouldn't have had the luxury of getting on his feet because someone would have needed to step up. But I did step up. I was the one who made the calls, set up the payments, absorbed the cost without flinching. And all of that bought me a seat at the end of the table and a $30 gift card. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and canceled every single automatic transfer. All of them. The mortgage supplement, the insurance, the medication, the car payment, the internet, everything. Gone. Effective immediately. Then I packed my bag quietly, carried it to my car, and drove home at midnight without saying goodbye. The highway was empty. I drove with the radio off. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt light. Like I'd set down something I'd been carrying for so long that I'd forgotten it was heavy. The first week was quiet. No calls, no texts. That didn't surprise me. They usually went a week or two without reaching out unless they needed something. The second week, my mom sent me a text asking if I'd changed banks because a payment had bounced. By the end of week 3, my phone started ringing. First, my mom, then my dad, then my brother, which was a first. I let them all go to voicemail. My mom's first voicemail was casual. She just asked me to call her back when I got a chance and mentioned something about an issue with the insurance payment. My dad's was shorter. He just said to call my mother. Then the second round of calls came, and the tone changed. My mom left a message that sounded shaky. She said the mortgage company had sent a warning letter, and she didn't understand what was happening. She asked if something was wrong with my account. Not wrong with me, wrong with my account. My brother called next and left a voicemail, telling me that mom was stressed, and I needed to sort out whatever banking issue I was having. He said it like I'd made a clerical error, like I'd accidentally stopped funding their lives and just needed to fix it. I let another few days pass before I finally called my mom back. When she picked up, she immediately started talking about the bills. The mortgage was behind. The car payment had bounced twice. The insurance had lapsed. She was confused and upset and kept asking what happened. I told her calmly that nothing had happened to my account. I told her I had cancelled the transfers, all of them, on purpose. There was a long pause. She asked me what I meant. I told her I meant exactly what I said. I was no longer going to be paying their bills. I explained that I'd been doing it for 6 years and no one had acknowledged it, and I was done. She started crying. She told me I couldn't just do that without warning. She said they depended on that money. She said I was putting them in a terrible position. I told her I understood, and that they had about 30 days from when the transfer stopped to figure out an alternative. She asked me why I was doing this. I told her about the birthday, about the trip to Italy versus the gift card, about the speech she gave my brother about pride versus the note she gave me about appreciating the little things. I told her it wasn't about the money or the gift. It was about what those things revealed, that after everything I'd done, I was still the kid on the computer who didn't matter as much. She got defensive. She said the trip was something they'd been planning for months, and it wasn't meant to be a comparison. She said I was being sensitive. She said I'd always been like this, always keeping score, always making things about me. She brought up a holiday from 3 years ago, when I apparently seemed distant and didn't participate in family games, as if that was evidence of some long-standing character flaw, rather than the natural consequence of being ignored. I told her I wasn't keeping score. I was reading the scoreboard they'd built. She didn't have a response to that. I could hear her breathing on the other end, and for a second I almost caved. Almost apologized just to make the tension stop. But I didn't. Because I knew that if I folded now, nothing would ever change. I'd just go back to being the quiet one who paid the bills and ate the wrong flavor of cake at his own birthday party. I told her I needed some space, and that I loved her, and I ended the call. My dad called me the next day. His approach was different. No tears, no guilt, just that quiet, measured frustration he uses when he thinks someone is being irrational, but doesn't want to say it outright. He told me that what I was doing was going to hurt them financially, and asked if that was really what I wanted. I told him I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I also didn't want to keep being the person who held everything together, while being treated like I contributed nothing. He told me I was blowing things out of proportion. He said they loved me the same as my brother, and I was reading too much into a birthday party. He said families aren't perfect, and I should know that by now. I asked him a simple question. I asked him to tell me one time in the last 5 years that he'd told me he was proud of me. Not proud of what I could pay for. Not grateful that the bills were covered. Proud of me as a person. Proud of who I am. He went quiet, not for a second. For a long time. I could hear the TV in the background, some game show with applause and buzzers, while my father sat there unable to answer the simplest question a son could ask. I told him I loved him, but I was done being the safety net that nobody noticed, until it was gone. Then, I hung up. My brother called me. First real conversation we'd had in months, that wasn't just surface-level small talk at a family dinner. He didn't come in aggressive. He was more confused than anything. He told me Mom and Dad had told him about the transfers, and he said he genuinely had no idea I'd been paying for that much. He thought I maybe helped out a little during Dad's health scare, and that was it. He had no clue it had been going on for 6 years. He asked me why I never said anything. I told him because it shouldn't have to be announced for it to matter. I asked him if he'd ever wondered how our parents, on their combined income, were managing a mortgage, 2 car payments, insurance, medication, and utilities without any financial stress. He admitted he hadn't really thought about it. He said he just figured they were doing okay, and he took that at face value. I told him that was the problem. Everyone took it at face value, because I made it easy. I made their comfort invisible, and somewhere along the way I became invisible with it. Then he said something that actually got to me. He told me he was sorry. Not for the birthday thing specifically, but for never noticing. He said he felt like an idiot looking back at all those holiday dinners where he was celebrated, and I was barely acknowledged, knowing now that I was the one keeping the lights on the whole time. He told me he understood why I was upset, even if he didn't fully agree with how I handled it. I appreciated that. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I'd ever gotten from either of our parents. It was the first time in years I felt like someone in my family actually saw me. He told me he was going to start helping out financially. He said he talked to Mom and Dad about splitting costs and figuring out a budget that didn't depend on me. I told him that was between them, and I wished him luck. Update 2. 3 weeks later. My mom called me again. This time she was calmer. She told me that my brother had stepped in with some money, but it wasn't enough to cover what I'd been paying. She told me they were looking into refinancing the house and possibly downsizing the car. She asked me again if I would consider resuming even partial payments. I told her no. She asked me what it would take. I told her honestly that I didn't know. I told her it wasn't about punishing them. I told her that I had spent 6 years quietly keeping their lives afloat, and the only thing I'd gotten back was the message that my brother was the one they were proud of. I told her that something inside me just broke that night, and I couldn't go back to the way things were, not right now, maybe not ever. She told me she was sorry about the birthday. She said she could see now how it looked. She said the Italy trip had been partially funded by a small inheritance from my grandmother that they'd earmarked for my brother's milestone birthday, and that they hadn't thought of it as a comparison. She admitted she could have handled my gift differently. She said the gift card was a last-minute decision because they didn't know what I wanted. I told her that in 6 years of receiving my money every month, they'd never once asked what I wanted. For anything, not a birthday, not a holiday, not even what kind of cake I liked. She was quiet after that. Before she hung up, she told me she loved me and asked me to not disappear from their lives. I told her I wasn't disappearing. I was just finally standing in the place I'd actually been put. Update 3. 2 months later. I want to be honest with how I'm feeling now, because I know people on here love a clean revenge story, where the person walks away feeling like a champion. That's not exactly how this went. Do I regret cutting the payments? No, not for a second. That money was enabling a dynamic where I was valued for what I provided, not who I was. Stopping it was the only way to make the invisible, visible. I've had nights where I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I destroyed my relationship with my parents for good. I've had moments where I almost logged back into the bank and restarted everything, just to stop the guilt. I didn't, but the urge was real. My brother has genuinely stepped up. He's covering about half of what I used to, which means my parents are managing, just tighter than before. He and I have been talking more than we have in years. He told me recently that the Italy trip felt different to him now, knowing what he knows. He said he hadn't earned it any more than I had, and he wished our parents could see that. My dad called me last week. It was a short call, but it was different from every other conversation we'd ever had. There was no agenda, no financial question, no frustration in his voice. He told me he'd been thinking about what I'd asked him, about when he'd last told me he was proud. He said he'd been turning it over in his head for weeks, and he didn't have a good answer, and that bothered him more than any of the money stuff. He told me he was proud of the man I'd become, even though he'd done a poor job of showing it. He said it quietly, like it was hard to get the words out, like he was forcing himself through something he'd never practiced. He said he knew he and Mom had gotten it wrong for a long time, and he didn't know how to fix it, but he wanted me to know that he saw me now. I didn't say much, I just told him thank you. And for the first time in years, I meant it. My mom and I are still distant. She texts me occasionally, mostly about mundane things. The weather, something she saw on TV, a recipe she tried. She hasn't brought up the money again. I think she's trying to reconnect, without addressing the elephant in the room, and honestly, I understand that. Some people don't know how to say sorry directly, so they say it sideways, through small gestures in the effort of showing up even when it's awkward. I'm letting her move at her pace. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying something heavy without anyone noticing. For anyone reading this who feels like there is a similar spot, where you're the one holding everything together and no one seems to care, I'm not going to tell you to blow it all up like I did. That's a decision only you can make, and it comes with costs. But I will say this, if the people in your life only notice you when you stop giving, it's worth asking yourself if they really deserve all that you carry. That tells you everything about where you stand. And you deserve to stand somewhere better. I don't know what happens next with my family, but for the first time in 6 years, I feel like whatever happens, it'll be because I'm choosing it.